Hey there, I'm Lee Rowley, and this is Lee After Dark. Why? Because there's more to being a business leader than just business. Each episode, one brave entrepreneur ejects the elevator pitch and just gets real. And today, I would like to welcome for our very first reboot episode, James Briscall. How are you?
I'm very well, very well. Thank you, Lee. I always like to say that I'm calling in from the future. So I am actually in the future compared with you, and it's a great future.
You are. I was going to say, how's the future looking?
The future is looking spectacular. It's a lovely day here, a lovely morning. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So, as I have to tell everybody, this is, we've been down for a few weeks. So this is the first episode since my wife and I moved from the city and took our abode in the rolling hills of the countryside and all that. So we've got the internet issues all worked out, and we're back and ready to roll. So the premise of this show, if you guys haven't been here before, is that each episode we bring an entrepreneur on and then challenge them to spend 20 minutes talking about anything but their business. Now, sometimes that's a giant pain in the, but Brian here said, when James came in and he said, I've got Frank Zappa, I've got Ghosts, I've got Mongolia, I've got a guitar and a greyhound. And so would any of those things be great for Lee After Dark? And I was like, how quick can we get you on here? Of course, that sounds fantastic. So what I'm going to do, since you already know the rules, is I'm going to go ahead and set a timer here. And then to keep us honest, and then start wherever you want. What do you want to get into for the next 20 minutes?
Why don't I get into Frank Zappa to set the tone?
All right, let's do that.
So why did I suggest Frank Zappa? Well, I was introduced to Frank's music as a rather naive 15-year-old. And I could recall the moment when a friend put on a vinyl, an LP, and back in the daily, and it was Dynamo Hum. And I don't know whether you know the song, but for a 15-year-old, it kind of changed my world. It changed my world. And I then went on to explore his music. And at the time, I'd been playing viola in orchestras and chamber orchestras for about 10 years. But also that the reason that a friend was playing it was I was at the crossover and I'd just taken up the guitar. And so I was doing that first band, playing the Sex Pistols, AC/DC. So listening to Frank Zappa, it was that juxtaposition of classical and rock.
Okay, right. And what would be your 20-second description of Frank Zappa for people who are not familiar, as in anybody who's under 30?
Yeah. So Frank Zappa was a composer. He came to the fore with Frank Zappa and the Mothers in the 60s, very experiential music and live shows. And then in the 80s, when I was introduced to him, he became more politically inclined and was a advocate of free speech. And I believe he then went on to become politically involved with the Prime Minister of Czechoslovakia, I believe, or Yugoslavia. And sadly, he passed away from prostate cancer probably 20 years ago. But I know in his final years, he actually really got into classical music, very, very, very complicated classical music. And yeah. And I think the most important thing with Frank is that nothing was off limits to write about or sing about. Mm-hmm. And it was all very, so as an impressionable 15-year-old, it was so important. It gave me permission to almost kind of sing or do or play what I wanted, and but you could write hilarious songs, but very well composed. So
absolutely. I saw that shining through in some of Dweezil Zappa's work too. Of course, he had several children that were that were musicians, if I remember right.
Yeah, and he always gave them great names. So there was Dweezil. I've forgotten his younger brother, but the most famous one was Moon Unit, who was I think she was 15 or 14, and she did the backing vocals of an 80s song called called Valley Girl, and it was taking the Mickey out of the Valley scene.
Really?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what she became famous for.
Zappa trivia for 500.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, so we got Zappa. If you haven't checked out Frank Zappa, you got to. I mean, you know, I'm always like telling people to go back and listen to Arlo Guthrie, but like, you know, when you need to kick it up a notch, just go find some Zappa.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So we got that nailed down. Ghosts. Tell me about ghosts.
Okay, ghosts. So the disclaimer is that I haven't seen a ghost. So that is the disclaimer. Although my grandparents were driving along this Roman road, which wasn't far from where I spent my youth. They were driving along there before I was born, but it was a Roman road, which actually, so I should probably add to you and your viewers that I was born and brought up in the southern England near a city of Canterbury, very, very ancient. And so the Romans landed there in about 400 AD, and they were famous for building straight roads. So they built a road from where they landed, which was on the southeast coast, to Canterbury, and then from Canterbury there's another straight road up to London. And so my grandparents were driving along this road from the coast to Canterbury one night apparently, and suddenly this figure on horse, this Roman soldier figure, sort of rode out, and they drove straight through it. But
wow, okay.
Astonishing. But why I put down ghosts was really because being in England is so ancient that, and my passions for architecture, for woodlands, for the history of both buildings, and I would say I was dragged around, but I was taken around to castles and old houses and all that wonderful kind of stuff in the 70s and 80s. And I actually spent my youth in a very old house, which was next to an even older church. So really, one could say the other side was all around me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And especially in an environment steeped in that much history, which is something that, you know, Americans can't even comprehend. I mean, you know, old for us, if it's 100-year-old city, you know, that's ancient, man. Knock it down and build another one. You know, I mean, we have Vegas, for crying out loud. If it's past 10 years, you knock it down and build it again. So, you know, I've never had the opportunity. I've visited Croatia. And that was a beautiful experience, but I've not had a chance to visit England, and I'm not sure when they're going to let us Americans back in. Maybe never. I can't blame them. You know, but you know, no, it's you know, it's a shame.
I think what really ties together those four subjects, because I was thinking about them this morning, and what really ties together my life is the stories, and that's what I was saying about each of Frank's songs is a hilarious story, and it's really the same with ghosts as well. It is the stories of the buildings and the stories of the church, the stories of the castles, and it reminded me once where it was probably 5 years ago, when myself and my children, we came back from New Zealand over to England, and we spent a holiday with my parents in Dorset, which is in the southwest, a beautiful area. And then I found this little booklet, which was to do with I think it was ghostly places or spiritual local places to where we were staying. And it was very interesting because it actually talked about how people are energetically bound to places and attracted to places within the countryside.
Okay.
And how they could even, because you've obviously heard of Stonehenge and the Aylesbury Circle and those huge stone circles. Well, if you go there and if you can sensitive and have some peace and quiet and clear your head, you can feel the energy. And so with these great big monoliths, which is why that they were put there for their spiritual and for their cosmic kind of ceremonies. So I bought this little book, and I can remember that we jumped in the car and we navigated around to all these funny places, and there was a well, I believe, and a prehistoric well, and there's a prehistoric they call a monolith with just 3 rocks, and there was also these tales of how this rock rolled down the hill every such and such a day. So it was all these fantastic stories, Lee, with the kind of the spiritual, ghostly underlying, which I think is a great way to summarize that area of British lore, of folklore.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because it does go far back, and because it does encompass some of the darker times of humanity as well.
Absolutely,
absolutely as well. So,
and I remember years ago, prior to immigrating here, I made a special effort to go to all the national parks in England over about an 18-month period.
Oh wow!
And yeah.
How many are there?
Because you were putting me on the spot now, but I'll probably say that I probably went to about 10. I would say, like an 18-month or 2-month period. And the northern ones, I don't know whether you've read any of Conan Doyle, the Sherlock Holmes, but
only recently.
But there was this fantastic black and white films, and there was a famous one called The Hound of the Baskervilles, where Holmes would have his bendy pipe and his deerstalker hat and his flowing tweed suit and his big cape, and he'd be sort of charging across these misty moorlands, either chasing or being chased by these bloodthirsty hounds, right? And the reason I tell that story, it ties into the ghost, because I would find these ancient monuments on the map and then navigate across these moors and try and find them. And there was more than one occasion where these moors were misty and raining, and you would find these places, and they would have an eerie feeling, like a really, really eerie feeling. And that, I guess, is my closest connection to seeing a ghost, is going to certain places and it's just a cold, eerie feeling.
Wow. Sounds like a good place to write a book, as long as you have a fireplace nearby.
A crackling fire almost cures everything. So
yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, that is really cool, and I love that. I hope that I get to actually experience that someday. Thank you so much for sharing that with us while we can't get to experience that. All right, Mongolia is up next.
Mongolia. So Mongolia, so I went there a couple of times in, I think, 97 and 98, a total of about 5 months in Mongolia, Kyrgyzstan. I think I went into China a little bit, but most of that was spent in Mongolia. Why did I choose there? At the time, I was still riding horses, and my mum said, hey, due to a long story, she was going on this trip for a 2-week ride, and I said, hey, I would love to come, because it was some of those remote places, and then I stayed on. And it's fascinating, really, because at the time the urban population was very connected to their rural cousins, so it was very easy to get out and about, because often people were taking a jeep out to go and see Aunt Maisie way out in the sticks. And they would love someone to come and join them and contribute to the fuel and everything else, right? So you'd often say you'd find yourself out in this huge landscape, great big plains, big rivers, big mountains, and Johnny was visiting Aunt Maisie, and they'd be here for a week or so, and you go, well, what can I do? And it's like, well. So that's where the idea came from, and that's really why I went back a second time. And the premise was to get out to the rural areas, to hire a couple of ponies and hire a local guide, and then take off for a week or two and sort of do a jaunt around the area. So that's where the premise came from.
Okay, awesome.
And that worked really well.
Experience?
Yeah, well, that worked really well because the guide was, say, Frank, and Frank hadn't seen his great aunt who lived even further out in the sticks, or his mate Johnny. So he would palm me off with like a 2 week or like a 1 week trip, but in actual fact, it was actually a trip from yurt to yurt, or gear to gear, which is the Mongolian word.
Yeah,
And about every day we would arrive somewhere, and they happened to either be a mate or a family member of our guide. And so they would open up the hospitality. It'd be amazing. So the stories are really about the vastness of the landscape, but then combined with the warmth of the welcome.
Okay.
And so what's a good story? Well, a good story is when you turn up at a village unexpected, they slaughter a goat in your honor.
Hmm.
And at this particular one, the evening came, and we were the goat was unfortunately bubbling away on the fire. And on that trip, I was traveling with my sister, and unbeknown to me, the poor parts, the lower quality parts of meat were seen as the shoulder or the hip or the back stripes, and the higher quality was the offal and the head.
Really? Okay.
So my sister was eating some prime goat steak, and what I got presented with was a goat's head on a plate and a big knife.
Okay. Right. And you're sitting there going, how do I approach this?
How do I approach this? So someone carefully showed me how to pick out an eyeball, and so that was my hors d'oeuvre, a goat eyeball. And yes, your face was basically how it tasted. That expression there was, oh my goodness.
Wow. Okay.
And
Ooh.
then the knife was to break into the skull and eat the brain. So that was just a little story of what to expect when as a man you would turn up, and to wash it down, I was then offered the liver and the kidney, and meanwhile my sister was feasting away on the on the steak and the shoulder and whatnot.
Yeah. I don't know. The hat's tip of the hat to you, because like, I don't know. That reminds me of like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom when they like pull the monkey brain,
Yeah.
So you tried it, and I always say experience life, but like I think I'd even have to stretch to that. So kudos to you for that. And most of Mongolia is kind of just a windswept, barren desert sort of thing, isn't it?
In the northern area, there's a very famous lake, and there's mountains and forests around there.
Oh,
so
okay.
we explored that for a couple of weeks, and then further south on the border of Inner Mongolia, there's the Gobi Desert, and we hired a jeep and spent a week driving across that, and you can go to this amazing area where you see sort of dinosaur footsteps.
Oh my! Wow!
It's sort of in the rocks and whatnot, which is really amazing. And then on the far west of the country, there's a mountain range, and we actually walked through the mountain range to Kyrgyzstan. So, yeah. So
wow. It's to have those kinds of people to have those kinds of experiences is amazing.
I really feel blessed looking back. It was a remote area then, and again, it was the people and the people stories, Lee.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So we got one left. We got a greyhound and a guitar. So bring us home.
So I can remember a story. Well, so I used to play guitar. I was like avid. I was almost semi-professional playing in bands, and it was misspent university playing in bands and listening to vinyl. So So myself and my best mate, we thought that we were Eric Clapton and Jack Bruce of Cream. That was our fantasy. And I don't know whether you remember, but Keith Richards has talked about many years ago about how he was brought up with the vinyl records of, say, Howling Wolf and the Muddy Waters. And then on the first Rolling Stones tour of the States, which I believe was about 65, he actually got to meet a few of his heroes. There's a famous story, I think, where he was in Sun Records studio and Muddy Waters was painting the walls. Maybe that's an urban myth, but that is a story. So we thought, well, wouldn't it be great to go over and really see a little bit of this history, which we had also, like Keith had done 30 or 40 years earlier.
Sure.
We had listened to the records. So we went over there. At the time, we could buy a very cheap 3-month pass for the Greyhound. And what we did and what our plans were just to go to the main cities, so Memphis, the main musical centers, right? The centers of our heroes. So Memphis for B.B. King and Elvis, obviously. Austin, down in Texas for Stevie Ray Vaughan and ZZ Top. New Orleans, well, too many to mention. I mean, all that wonderful style there.
Okay.
I've forgotten the famous pianist John, and then San Francisco for the 60s and the hippie thing. So, and it was amazing because again, it was the people who we met on the Greyhound.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I think the only one that I didn't hear, well, there were a couple, but I think the Motown thing in Detroit, which, you know, Detroit's, everybody has their opinions about it, but the Motown Museum there has definitely been one of the highlights of my life.
Fantastic. I would love to go back because there were so many more places.
Absolutely. We definitely have a rich and diverse musical heritage, and plus we pump out a lot of garbage music too. So if you're into meaningless bubble pops, well, we got that in spades. But really cool. Like, and thank you so much for sharing these stories with us, James. And we've hit the 20-minute Lee After Dark not talking about your business challenge. So invisible confetti rains down and all that good stuff.
Thank you, kindly.
Thank you. Oh, I didn't know if I could. No. So being a man of my word, I want to give you 5 minutes to talk about you, your business, how people can get a hold of you. The floor is yours, my friend.
Sure. Thank you so much, Lee. So how we connected was through a passion project of mine, which is writing articles, and so that has led to me getting back into coaching. So I help CEOs become the hero in their own hero's journey.
Okay.
So they can do more, love more, and be more.
Okay.
And that is a reflection of my journey. And I guess to summarize, it is a way of, do you know that you probably know the hero's journey, right, Lee?
Of course.
With you're going along and then something comes, you hit a brick wall, there are the obstacles, and then we take that step of the point of no return and we become almost reincarnated. So, and that's a reflection of my journey. And what's so powerful about that in these present times is seeing present times not as a state of a victim, but being able to see them as part of our journey to become more and to circumvent and to rise over those obstacles. And the lessons learned can then lead us to greater insights, both within our personal life and within our business life. So
wonderful. And if you were to describe an ideal CEO to work with, what would their personality be like?
Their personality would well, where this also came from is someone asked me, well, what do I enjoy? And I didn't realize that I couldn't put a finger on it because everything seemed to have a purpose. So really, it is for the CEOs who have lost what they enjoy in life. So they might they might have lots of family time. They might be looking after themselves. They might be running a business, but the enjoyment's been lost into the joy. It's more of achieving goals or making time for, rather than getting a sense of deep joy. And that's been one of the biggest realizations in my journey. So really, a CEO, up to say 10 people, 5 million plus in the revenue, mid 40s, and but someone who knows that they need to refine the joy, because their life's grayscale as opposed to full color.
That's an excellent way of putting it, and all of those years putting in the time and effort to get where you want can leave you feeling very gray. Absolutely. So I'm thankful for what you do for people. So where can people get a hold of you and find out more?
The easiest way is just to email me.
Okay.
At jrbriscall.com, which is jrbriscall.com, and we'll open the conversation.
Fantastic, and we'll make sure to have that in the show notes too, so that people can get in touch with you directly. All right, well, thanks so much for hanging out with me. And any parting thoughts before we wrap this up today?
I think you're doing a great podcast. I'd love to come back and share some more stories if and when. Absolutely. And really for everyone to embrace their own journey and see it as a way to becoming a hero, and give themselves permission to become a hero in their own lives.
Yes. I could not have said it better myself, and I'm right there with you. Well, thank you again. We are out of time, but if you enjoyed Lee After Dark more than the rest of the Drek out there, then go over to leeafterdark.com and subscribe to our channel, all right? And go over to the Copywriting Underworld, which is my new little project, which is uw.bowtieup.com, to get weekly copy tips from Old Scratch himself. All right, until then, you can check us out on YouTube. You can check us out on Anchor FM, Pocket Cast, Pocket Rocket. I don't know. We're pretty much everywhere. But we will be back next week with another episode. Until then, this is Lee Rowley with my good friend, James Briscall. Be present and be well. Let that go. All right, I need to stop the